And so, as you heard, the former president providing a glimpse into what his 2024 comeback would look like, words that resulted in pushback from inside his own party.
I don't want to reinforce that defiling the Capitol was okay. I don't want to do anything from raising bail to pardoning people who take the law in their own hands because it will make more violence more likely.
And we should point out that is the same Lindsey Graham who, after the insurrection, said he was finished with the Trump show, and then days later said there was no Republican Party without Donald Trump. So joining us this morning, some of the brightest minds in politics. Dr. Niambi Carter is a professor of political science at Howard University, and Dr. Rashawn Ray hails from the Brookings Institute. And Dr. Carter, I'll begin with you. We are getting dangerously close to a repeat of January 6th. The former president once again calling for massive protest as he refuses to this day to even concede defeat.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is actually what he wants, because he wants to create a problem and then fill the problem, right? To solve the problem. The problem is we have corrupt elections, according to Donald Trump. And he's the only person that can bring any kind of correction. But it's also curious, right? If you just lose a little logic here, if the elections are so corrupt, why would you want to continue to participate in them and then have those same elections legitimize you? So Donald Trump is talking out of both sides of his mouth here. But one thing we know is white grievance and violence is always politically useful. And so he's content to continue down this road, but it's not really because he actually believes that he won. It's because he has investigations ongoing in Georgia and New York, and he is going to seek re-election in 2024, if for no other reason than to try to use executive privilege to shield himself from those kinds of inquiries and prosecutions. And that really, he's dangerous to the Republican Party at this point. If they want to continue to hold themselves to any kind of standard, they're going to have to be the ones to put the kibosh on Donald Trump, because he is not going to stop.
Dr. Ray, Dr. Carter points out something, by the way, it's starting to sound like a medical practice here in a moment, but she points out something true, which is that the only avenue that the former president has to escape prosecution on so many fronts is winning the White House. If not, he faces the possibility of spending time in jail. The only thing standing in the way of him going to jail actually is Merrick Garland, who so far does not appear to show the backbone to want to prosecute him. But if we look at this strictly from a standpoint of a man who may have broken the law, his out of jail free card is the White House. Why don't politicians see that for what it is?
Well, look, I think many of them do. I think they fundamentally understand what this is. A lot of Republicans are trying to hold on to Trump because them staying in office is oftentimes contingent on their relationship or supposed connection to Donald Trump. Even if Donald Trump gets in the White House, it's unclear if that would actually happen. But look, this is going to take Republicans to do something about this. Make no mistake, the statements that Trump is making, he is sending a loud bullhorn to white supremacists and white people more broadly, that when you break the law, when you are trying to preserve white supremacy, I will be there to bail you out. So he is speaking to a broader base of people. And there are a lot of Republicans, including those in South Carolina, including those in Georgia and across the country, who do not agree with what Trump is doing, but are unwilling to speak up and say something about it because they know that their political livelihood is tied to him.
Niambi, we keep showing the images of the Trump rally, and people keep saying, look at how many people are there. They forget two things. One is that Joe Biden won by a margin of 8 million votes, the largest margin in political history. But also, we forget that the states that they're claiming were unfairly targeted are states where the black vote made the difference. For Black America, we need to keep reminding Black Americans that this is about an election that Black America made a major difference in because of the changing demographics in this country, and that this is white backlash.
But, you know, I think Black people understand that very clearly and very acutely. We've had multiple historical lessons of it, and Black people in everywhere from Georgia to Tennessee are experiencing that white backlash in terms of restrictions on their votes, redistricting, right? I mean, you look at what happened to Nashville in this recent round of redistricting, and it's very clear, I think, to many Black people what's at stake here, which is why I think you saw more people turning out in 2020, it was more that they are Black than they were Democrat or even in love with Joe Biden, because when we lose big in these elections. And so we couldn't afford to sit home. But I also think it's important to remind people that, Black people have a limit as well, particularly these politicians. And so Black people are tired of being the ones that have to save democracy over and over and over again. And not necessarily they intend to do that. They're trying to save themselves. But it still stands that when Black people are doing what they do politically, it also helps a lot of other kinds of identity groups. And so, we don't have infinite wells of drive, and we don't have infinite wells of um, get up and go. I mean, it's exhausting. It's taxing and mentally and emotionally, not to mention just time, right? The amount of time it takes to register and do all of these things in the face of all of these voter ID laws and this sort of changing electoral front, which is why that voting rights conversation for the Biden White House is so important and so significant. They can't keep kicking that can down the road, because what happens if, you peel off enough Black voters, or what happens if these restrictions are just enough, because they're not aimed at people who vote all the time. They're aimed at people who are sort of casual voters who step in and out of the political process. What happens if those people are peeled off of those voting rolls? And I think we cannot assume that we can always just out organize this machine of white backlash, as you put it, that is really kind of primed and ready to go after Black voters, Indigenous voters, Latino voters, poor voters, young voters, elderly voters, kind of at all times.